So how did America go from this to this? Rural America used to be the beating heart of American culture. Images of growing up on the farm or riding your bike to the drugstore, heading to the fair, all invoke a feeling of nostalgia for something that I never even experienced, compared to the modern day where the average family farm has been totally priced out, and while some have transitioned to living in the suburbs or the city or just out of that lifestyle by choice and over time, the ones left holding things together have been isolated by their identity getting deconstructed by social media. I grew up hearing about and seeing the remnants of this past world. My dad's side of the family grew up in a small county in southern Michigan. My great-grandpa raised horses in Toledo and Detroit, and his wife, my great-grandma, is actually still alive at 96, and tells stories of growing up on the farm with a huge family that all kind of looks after each other. And while some of my current family still lives in the area and actually still participate with like livestock and some agriculture stuff, they increasingly seem to be the outliers in rural life. My grandma tells stories of, like running out and saying, "I'll be home when it gets dark." Like I try to put myself in that position. If I was like 8 years old, that would have been 2012 for me. Like I couldn't even imagine just being like, "All right, Mom, I'll see ya, I'm heading into town." Like it just wouldn't happen, mainly because everything's 1,000 miles apart in suburban America, which is a whole nother problem. But also just growing up with that much trust in a society. Like I'd trust my kids to run around like maybe the neighborhood, but to just kind of be independent and do your thing for the whole day and be trusted to come back and trust that no one was gonna mess with you or anything, that feels increasingly far away. The world also just stayed small. When I was in elementary school, the world kind of felt like that. You saw the same kids every day, you had the same routine, you'd come home and do it all over again. And for me at least, really didn't have technology yet to kind of take me out of the present there. Whereas for a current teenager growing up, once I got to middle school, all of a sudden, I'm in a class of like 600 kids, and eventually in like 7th or 8th grade, I got my first iPhone. So I was watching, reels of people dying and then adults having sex on my phone when I was their age. Like you can't even imagine how much that changes the game, like when you have access to those things. It just completely rewires your brain to see stuff like that. So yeah, as someone that grew up with a big class, even my parents talk about, they had like class like 80 kids, and I couldn't even imagine that. Knowing everyone in my school in and out, kind of knowing their whole backstory and family or whatever, like just so different from my experience. There's also just a lot more hands-on, just real life kind of stuff going on. Like your parents teaching you real like hands-on skills, how to fix and repair things yourself, and not be so dependent, like go ride my truck to the store and get me this to learn how to drive or something. It gives kids a lot more independence, lets them experience life a little bit more. Because in the modern day, kids aren't trusted with shit. Like a 13-year-old right now, what could a 13-year-old possibly do in the US? You couldn't get anywhere without an adult driving you. And when you're living in farm country in the Midwest in the 1970s, there's probably a lot of dull time as well. You wouldn't have that constant stimulation. So it'd be like if there was an event downtown or something, everyone showed up. And it's kind of reinforcing that community bit, because you're seeing everybody all the time, catching up and staying connected to the people around you. So how did people mess this up? Well, first off, some people like my dad just wanted a different lifestyle and wanted to be around more stuff and have more job opportunities and things like that. It was also kind of the time in the US where like suburbia was kind of growing. That wasn't always a concept. Before it was more just cities and the countryside. Now the whole US economy is kind of going to be designed around these suburban areas, because that's where most of the consumer spending in the society was naturally going to be. And the transition to white collar work. There was very few people doing white collar work in the early 1900s. Interestingly, at least to me, that's a new thing. Like people weren't doing that before. From the 1930s, US independently owned farms dropped by 66%. In the 80s, there was a farm debt crisis where land values plummeted and the export market was messed up at the time, which that event, and probably a ton of small events as well, just kind of stacked up, and over time, over decades, it kind of became these huge industrial conglomerates and individual farm owners. But just the barrier to entry money-wise, like these tractors and stuff, here, hopefully I'll put it on the screen or something, but that stuff was like probably way more expensive than you imagine, just the upkeep. And then you also have to buy from these specific seed manufacturers who have somehow patented seeds, which I don't know who I got to talk to say that that's a bad idea, but how's that a thing? That just kind of frustrates me. And all these rural communities weren't agriculture. Some of them was like a textile mill would open up in the countryside and a town kind of developed around it. And especially where I live in the Rust Belt, a lot of those factories went overseas, and all of the surrounding towns, I mean, what other option did they have? They had to leave town. They had to go find somewhere else to work. At least a lot of people. I mean, anyone that's driven around in the Rust Belt knows that there's a lot of towns where it's just like one class factory around a bunch of random houses and stuff. Like, those all used to be communities, which is just kind of nuts. I mean, Detroit's pretty much just a big version of that, even though it's making a comeback now in other sectors. When the automotive industry left, I mean, just destroyed them. To top it off, companies like Walmart and Dollar General have just corroded the American countryside. I mean, all of these, every Walmart you see and shop in, that could have been an independently owned business, or a Dollar Tree, both of them. And I mean, those things are everywhere. Like, how many more Dollar Trees could there be? So with the economic seams of rural society kind of falling apart, social media and technology in general would come in and kind of deal the final blow. It's hard to imagine a world where things like identity and culture weren't shaped by technology and could like independently rise up and become their own thing. And I mean, I'm sure they were influenced by the times, newspapers, radios, and then eventually TV. Like, they would be influenced, but it would have more individuality. And even if it wasn't super different from everybody else, it would seem that way because that's the only world that you know. I personally have traveled around the country working and living in a van, and anecdotally, the performative side effects of social media have hit them as well. And similar to the rest of society, algorithmic sorting replaced organic community identity. Comparison culture is also disproportionately damaging to monetarily poor people. I've heard a lot of stories from a lot of people, like my great-grandma and my grandma, about growing up in rural southern Michigan. They never really mentioned poverty. And they weren't necessarily, they had like a house over their head and probably always knew where their next meal was coming from, but definitely grew up with much less. And they never really talk about it. They never talk about being poor. That's never part of the thing that they think of when they remember memories or like living then. Because being poor and not having things, it doesn't have to have the negative connotations attached to it that we give it. So when those don't exist, I mean, there's no stigma around being poor, but over time, especially because of social media, you can kind of build that stigma, and all of a sudden, you think that of yourself. So now they attach those labels to themselves and feel other people feeling that. So it's just in the common imagination a lot more than it probably was at the time, when there's nothing really to compare yourself to. Other people in the town, I'm sure there's like, minor jealousies of like teenagers in high school or between adults, someone has like a better horse or something. Like, it's just on a smaller scale. These huge social media platforms use algorithmic identity sorting. It feeds them into content ecosystems that tell them who they are and what they should or shouldn't like, which on a small group of people is much easier to do. It becomes much more self-reinforcing. Then, you can combine that with the built-up nostalgia and emotion in somebody that's watched, this world change right in front of them, to where they'll naturally resonate with someone claiming that they're going to make things like great again, like we're going to get back to that point. And that conclusion might feel political, and honestly, some of my other videos, you might get a little bit more insight as to how I might feel. I just don't feel like dragging the message of this video down with politics. I'm just telling you why certain things are associated, at least from my perspective. I could be wrong and you're welcome to disagree with me, but I'm just pointing out things that I see. And I think it's interesting to try to associate them, which, as someone that really likes history, it's kind of fun to like compare and contrast with things that have happened in the past with things that have happened now, and seeing if you can draw any parallels. But really, the culprit is big business and multi-trillion-dollar tech companies, which, I mean, try to give me an example of something that wasn't ruined by those two things. I'll wait. But I think it's an interesting look into a lifestyle we all think about in some way and is in a common consciousness in some way, but is for the most part gone. And if you do feel like you still live in a town like that, or if it's frustrating you that I'm saying such a thing, I'm glad you're still living like that. Definitely, that doesn't upset me. I'm actually very happy about that. You can tell me all about that. Have a good one.